All right, I think we'll get started. I know people will be joining. Just welcome to our session on nutrition. My name is Dave Tessler. I'm in this context, the youth chair of USATF New England. We all have multiple hats, of course. I think we've done a good job here with the housekeeping up front. We've got everyone on mute, and only the people on mute can take yourself off. None of us can take you off. So if you're speaking and want to ask a question, you'll have to find that mute button. I'll be monitoring chat as we go along. So this nutrition talk is part of a program that the USATF New England board approved back in January that we're calling 2+22. So we spent a good amount of time and focus on coach education and training and what we do at practice. But for the practice to take, what do we do in the 22 hours away from practice? So this program is trying to drive awareness and enablement around things that impact our performance on and off the field, on and off the track. We're all very familiar with the workouts, our 400 repeats, our weight room work, our plyos, whatever it might be. But for that to take, we have to think about the other 22 hours, and that's in this equation here, the rest plus fuel. So stress plus rest plus fuel equals growth. You end up needing all three to get there. And obviously today we're going to focus on the fueling part of this equation. So before we introduce our speakers, I just want to highlight our most recent athlete of the month for February, Molly Seidel. In February, Molly earned a spot on the Olympic team by finishing second at the Olympic trials in Atlanta. She lives and trains here in Boston now. And only 25, Molly has accumulated quite a list of accomplishments. But like many of us, her journey wasn't a straight line and won't be a straight line. She's dealt with significant issues with multiple stress fractures that she connects back to her issues with nutrition. I invite you to read a little bit more about Molly. But I want to share as we transition to our speakers, her quote here at the bottom, that long-term health is more important than running a fast 5K 3 months from now. And running a 5K 3 months from now seems like a pretty good idea, no matter how fast you go, given the current state. But here's wisdom from an Olympian as we transition into this talk about nutrition. So let me introduce our speakers with us here, Laura Morretti and Nicole Farnwworth, both part of Boston Children's Hospital Sports Medicine Department, registered dietitian, certified dietitians. Nicole is a former multi at Harvard, so she knows that track and field is more than running. She knows jumps, she knows throws, and she might even acknowledge that there's walking involved in track and field. Laura is a marathoner and a triathlete, and both have worked with youth across multiple sports, and these concepts that they'll share with us and make us aware of are universal. Some of our athletes are track and field athletes in the fall or just in the spring, playing basketball, hockey, many other things across the calendar. We all look forward to getting back to that. So Laura and Nicole, I'll turn it over to you. If you can, I think if you push the right buttons, you can share your presentation, and I'll let you further that introduction as appropriate.
Great. Thank you, David. I am getting this talk up right now. We are all learning lots of technology these days, aren't we? Okay. Nicole, are you on with me?
I am.
Excellent. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having us. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I think the timing couldn't be better to do some virtual learning in this very strange environment we're living in now. But it really is a good time to be thinking about laying the groundwork, and especially nutrition is something that we can all be working on now to really get ready for whenever that next season is. So yeah, so Nicole and I, let's get rolling, shall we? We're going to kind of pass this back and forth and both kind of jump in and get rolling here. Okay, so what is our agenda for today? First, we want to go through a nutrition overview. So I know when Nicole and I both present, we always like to make sure that everybody is really on the same page with understanding what we mean when we say a carbohydrate, what we mean when we say a protein or a fat, because there is, an incredible amount of misinformation out there. So, going to reputable sources, such as, Nicole and I, who are both registered dietitians, to get the real facts, the real information. So hopefully today we can clarify any myths that are out there, but that will be nutrition overviews, a little bit of nutrition school. Another one of our favorite tools that we will talk through next is called the Athlete's Plate. And that's a really, really wonderful visual tool that can help you figure out how you should be structuring your meals at different times in your training, right? When your volumes may be a little bit higher or a little bit lower. But we use that a lot. We use that on the daily, I would say. Nutrient timing. So this is going to be focusing on how to fuel before, during, and after training. So this is probably, Nicole, would you agree? This is probably one of the biggest questions we get from our patients and parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in track and field and in the sports that'll last like all day tournaments, all day meets, like how to sustain for sure.
Exactly. So that's an important topic. The next one, we're going to talk a bit more about health implications. And there's been a lot of this in, the news over the past few months, especially, with Mary Kane coming out and really speaking about some of the struggles that she's faced in her own running career. So this is going to really focus on what happens when that energy balance is off and what are the potential physical consequences as well as performance consequences. So this one is particularly a passion of Nicole's and mine, and our female athlete program at Boston Children's really focuses on this as well. So we will get into that. Then a little bit on vitamins and minerals. What do we recommend paying attention to? Do you need to be taking supplements and vitamins? Do you not need to be? We'll get into that. Hydration, always an important topic, especially as the temperature is getting warmer. And then actually, it also says questions on there, but it looks like it got cut off. But we have made sure we leave time for questions too. So let's get rolling, shall we?
Right, absolutely. So our first section is really going to be about what sets the athlete apart and things that we're thinking about and considering when we're working with our athletes, and especially our youth athletes. We do see athletes of all ages. I think the youngest I have is 9, and it goes on up into adulthood. Laura, how do you probably deal with a similar range?
Yeah, I say my youngest is, I think, about 6 or 7, and my oldest patient is an 85-year-old cyclist. So yes, all ages.
all ages. And a lot of much of our work focuses in on the youth, the children, adolescents, college students. So when we're thinking about what sets the athlete apart, what sets apart an athlete from a non-athlete, but then also towards the bottom, like what kind of things are we considering with our youth athletes? So the first one we have really is like performance goals. So as an athlete, I imagine if you're a coach, it is speaking about your athletes, or if you're an athlete yourself, you want to do your sport and do it well. And as we were talking about in the introduction with the 2x22 model, that rest, that fuel, that recovery work, it can really pay off when it comes to performance and having that knowledge and applicability. An athlete has higher energy and fueling needs than a non-athlete. So, we want to make sure that the athlete is accounting for that and really thinking about the fact that they need more food than their peers. They may need to eat more often to help keep them fueled, to keep them ready for practice, ready for recovery and performance. And thinking about our youth athletes, they are growing bodies, which our next slide will really go into in a lot of ways. But, there's extra energy needs accounted for the growing athlete, the developing athlete, as one is developing bone mass, muscle, going through puberty and things like that. So we want to account for that and make sure we're covering our bases there as well. And I like to say this, especially about like high school and college, I know Laura does as well, is that we deal with student athletes in a lot of cases. So a lot of the principles we're going to teach today and really discuss are about fueling the body as well as the brain. So really helping also with, concentration and things along those lines. And we also want you to feel good while you're having fun, while you're enjoying competition. Because when we feel good, we tend to be more relaxed, more confident. And so if we can give that confidence and that knowledge, then hopefully that can translate out onto the track and the field.
Yeah, exactly. So I will break down what this graph is explaining here. But as Nicole was mentioning, our athletes are youth athletes that are growing, right? There's a lot of change that's going on in bodies during adolescence, right? One of the biggest things, we work with an incredible sports endocrinologist, Dr. Kate Ackerman at Boston Children's Hospital, and we focus a lot on bone health. So if you take a look at the chart on your screen there, if you really focus in on that, the age in years is across the axis there on the bottom, you see age 10 to 20. If you notice how steep that curve is, what that indicates is the amount of bone mineral density that is being laid down by the body. So the steepest point of the curve is really, if you look from like 0 to 20, males develop bone density a little bit until a little bit later into their 20s, where females really should reach their peak bone mass by about age 22, approximately 18 to 22. We kind of use that range. So one of the reasons that we are so aggressive with our growing athletes is this is such a period of growth, maturation and development. It's also ligaments, not just the bones, but all that connective tissue. There's a tremendous amount of growth, right? And our youth growing at all different times, right? They sort of sprout up at different points, and people do hit puberty and things like that at different points. But something that we speak a lot about, and David mentioned this when talking about Molly in the intro, was that stress fractures are a major issue that we do see in athletes. I always say they're not completely preventable. As athletes, we do get injuries, right? But if we can do as much as we possibly can to prevent that. So when we're thinking about what does prevention look like in these adolescent years, there's a few things that we think about. For our female athletes, the research says, and our recommendation is, we want to see a female athlete getting her menstrual period by about 15 and a half years of age, because basically bone mass accrual occurs concurrently with increase in hormonal levels in the body. So if a female, let's say using that example, is low on estrogen, she's not sort of getting to that maturity point, she's going to lag in her bone development, which was going to make her more susceptible to stress injuries. Now, even though males have obviously different hormones in their body, we're going to talk about this a bit more later, but males, testosterone, right? There's still hormone levels that we do track in males. So a male who's also not getting in enough nutrition, enough calories to support what they're doing, could also have a negative impact on their bone density building, which can lead them much more susceptible to a stress fracture and a stress injury. So if you think about it, really what you're doing during your adolescent years is going to set the stage for what's going to happen later in life, right? A teenager might not, or an adolescent might not care too much about the risk of osteoporosis when they're, 60, but having stress injuries and being out of their sport is a real concern. And Nicole, how many athletes do we see in their 20s and 30s and 40s that maybe had these issues during adolescence, didn't address them, and now we're sort of left trying to repair the damage, but it's delayed, right? It's kind of hard. We can't go back to these bone building years.
Absolutely. And so we really, absolutely, Laura. And so we really try to capitalize on those bone building years if we can get an athlete in and thinking about it at that time.
Yep.
So that
the other, I'm sorry, Nicole and I are having a little bit of, we're used to being together all day, every day. So separation anxiety here. The other thing we speak a lot about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, so I won't get too into it, but, the biggest thing, so basically when we're thinking about bone health, we're thinking about this idea of an energy balance. So getting in enough calories to cover the energy expenditures, and not just getting in those calories, but also we want to really look at the amount of calcium that's coming in the diet, as well as vitamin D. And again, I won't I won't spoil that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's another important component.
Mhm. Absolutely. So next, we're going to transition to Nutrition School 101, as Laura was introducing in the beginning. And so we're going to go through the 3 macronutrients. And normally I want to quiz you that opportunity, which is okay. So we're really going to go through, the 3 big macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And so we'll take it all one by one, talk about why they're important, what their sources are in the diet, and what they do for us in the body.
Yep. That sandwich looks good right now. Is anyone else getting ready for lunch? I know I am. So it's making me hungry. So carbohydrates. So as Nicole said, usually this would be a point where we would have people raise their hands and tell us what they know about carbohydrates. And I know when I spoke to the Waltham Track Club, we had a great group there, and people were very energetic in their responses. And usually the first thing people say when I ask them, what is a carbohydrate? It's 99% of the time I get bread, right? People yell out bread. So yes, that is a carbohydrate. I have some lovely pictures to make you a little bit more hungry. But carbohydrates, really, the word I always like people to associate with carbohydrates is energy. So carbohydrates are your body's #1 energy source. So these are the things that your body is really looking to go towards, especially when you're playing a sport. So these are going to be the most important when you're running around, when you're getting more aerobic, right? So the more aerobic you are, the more you're running around, it actually increases your body's needs for these carbohydrates. So we're gonna do a little bit of science here. I promise not too much, but so carbohydrates are, yes, they are sugars. They break down in your body to what we call glucose, and I really call glucose the gasoline of the body, because that's what really, for an athlete, is so important. And people really like to hate on carbohydrates, but they're actually so important for energy. And all the research that we have out there continues to point to the fact that carbohydrates are really important, and athletes that get the right balance of carbohydrate in the diet outperform, especially in the running sphere, and aerobic sports are going to outperform people who don't get enough carbs. And so your body also stores these guys in your muscle and in your liver. So let's say you're not exercising, maybe you're having your bowl of pasta for dinner the night before a race day. The next day, your body's going to have that stored energy that it's going to draw from when you're working out. So some of our examples on this slide are things like pasta, fruit, breads, oatmeal. I could go on for days. I love this food group. Nicole and I both do. We're very fond of it. And I'll let Nicole take you into the different types.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. So going further into carbs, because as Laura said, we could talk about carbs all day. We like to categorize them and think about them in the ways that they're processed in the body and used for fuel. So you may have heard of carbs previously as simple or complex. And so we actually prefer to use the terminology slow digesting and fast digesting. So I'm going to intro and kind of discuss slow digesting carbs with you. These are carbohydrates that additionally have fiber and protein in their structure, which means that they're going to be more slowly digested in the body. And instead of having an effect where the glucose, when it's broken down, kind of rushes into the bloodstream, may lead to a little bit of a spike in blood sugar, that fiber and protein slows down breakdown and absorption, so it has more of a stabilizing effect. So you'll get that rise, but it won't necessarily come up and down very quickly. We like to emphasize including these at meals, and these are things that you probably think of, may have in your pantry now if the COVID-19 buying sprees haven't depleted your grocery stores. So
truth.
Yep. So things like multigrain pastas, brown rice, whole wheat breads, beans, cereal, and oatmeal. So these are the kind of sources that will have more of that stabilizing effect.
I feel like everybody has beans in their house right now, right, Nicole? I know I have many cans, so
many cans of beans,
non-perishables. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we can't talk about slow without talking about fast digesting, right? So these are the ones that kind of the opposite of what Nicole is saying. So these guys contain little to no fiber in them. So they do have a little bit more of what we say like a spiking effect on the blood sugar, which initially you might think of as not a great side effect, but as an athlete, it's all about timing with these guys. So we like you to focus more on those slow digesting carbohydrates throughout like most of the day. At least half of the grains you're taking in, we like to be more whole grain because they're going to give you more nutrients. They're also going to help you stay fuller for longer, which is also a good tip now that we're all kind of stuck inside and some people are kind of struggling with that grazing and continuing to go into the kitchen. It's good to have meals that are going to kind of stick with you, right? But when we think about these faster digesting ones, these are the ones we really love around sport. And the reason being is we kind of want that energy. We want that body to be ready to go with those blood sugar levels being a little bit spiked, because that's going to give your body something to really draw on quickly. So these are used like when you think about right before a workout. We will talk a little bit more about this. So again, I won't go too far into it, but eating something or even drinking something like this is where like our Gatorades, Gatorade or sport drinks come into play. If you're someone that maybe doesn't like to eat right before you work out, I love the Honey Stinger. Big fan of Honey Stinger products. So they have those little like chews or the Gatorade chews, which just give you a little bit of simple sugar, which could be a great thing to keep in a bag, in a backpack, especially if you're at a meet all day, all of a sudden your event is up and you need a little bit of energy. These guys are going to be really good for that. And they are also used in recovery because your muscles are looking for readily available sources of carbohydrate to replenish. Remember I said carbs are stored in your muscle. So for your body to recover, it wants easy carbs that are nice and available, right? It doesn't want things it's going to have to work too hard to get. So things like pretzels are also great, or dried cereal. Like I know some of my athletes do like even like make a mix of like Cheerios and raisins and like keep it in a little baggie. So that can be another, again, we have, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but so the slow versus the fast, there's room for both of them in the diet. And as Nicole and I are big fans of, it's important to know that like you don't only have to eat foods that are whole wheat all the time. It's okay to eat, white rice or to have things like that with a meal. I had Thai food the other night and I like the sticky white rice that comes with it. So it's okay to have that idea. We're big believers in the idea of balance in the diet.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So our big conclusion on this section, as Laura was saying, research has shown time and time again that athletes who get in sufficient carbohydrate for their sport outperform those who do not. So until the research says otherwise, and we're very evidence-based, we say eat pasta, run fasta. And Laura actually has a t-shirt with this to help advertise that to our clients, our patients.
Yep. I took a great picture wearing this shirt, eating a big bowl of pasta before the Boston Marathon last year, and it's one of my favorite photos of all time. So you too can find that shirt on Amazon. So I might need to brand one, Nicole. I might need to make one.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move into talking about protein. So our protein is, this picture shows many examples of protein. So protein is really important for muscle development, for strength, for growth. Again, those ligaments and those connections between your muscles and really helping, especially in a growing athlete. We want to make sure that we're developing not only strong bones, but strong connections between those bones, right? So protein, is something that also helps with making us feel a little bit fuller and more satisfied at a meal. So if you've ever eaten a meal that doesn't have any protein in it, you might notice that you got hungry really quickly afterwards. And that would be, the reason is because these guys stick with you a little bit longer. So if you look at our picture, things like eggs, fish, beef, chicken, nuts, beans are a vegetarian source. If we have any vegetarians out there, things like tofu or seitan or tempeh, there's a lot of different options. And quinoa is also another source, and any dairy products. So milk, yogurt, cheese, all of those things are going to be great options to get protein in your diet. And we really do like to see protein throughout the day. And these can change a little bit depending on what someone's sport is. But I mean, I always, to just keep it really simple, you want to think about getting protein in at every meal and snack throughout the day. And I think I actually have a slide that breaks this down a little bit more. Yep.
Yeah.
Nicole, I'll pass it to you.
All right. Sounds great. Yeah, so this slide really, in a really nice way, illustrates why protein timing is important and why we really emphasize getting protein throughout the day. And as Laura was saying, it's not that everyone's total protein needs are going to be 90 grams of protein, but in general, by getting in sources of protein consistently at every meal and snack, you're really maximizing your absorption, because the body does cap off absorption at around 30 grams at any one eating occasion. This is another reason we also really emphasize that our athletes, we don't want them skipping any meals, because if they're missing a meal or having a meal with really low protein, they're really missing out on an opportunity to get that protein in and help with that building, strength, and development process. So like more towards the right side rather than the left.
Right. This is one reason I always use this example. I know breakfast is often a struggle for a lot of our adolescents and our teenagers. I know Nicole and I both have this conversation a lot with our patients about the importance of breakfast. Your body, say like your gas tank is empty when you wake up in the morning. So especially before going to school, you really want to make sure that that protein is going to help you stay a little bit fuller for longer. So making sure you're having a source of dairy or some eggs or peanut butter or nuts. One of my favorite breakfasts, I think, is an easy one, is like doing oatmeal, but making my oatmeal with milk instead of water. And then I like to put a big old scoop of peanut butter in there. And yeah, I eat that a lot. And I find that really kind of like holds me. I need a high protein breakfast but then you're getting like your whole grains. And then of course you could throw any kind of fruit in there too. But breakfast is actually a really, 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 really important meal. So we've all heard the phrase that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I don't know if it's the most important, but it's equally important as all the other ones that you're having. Okay, good. I was hoping I put this slide in here. So this is kind of an example of how much protein is in different foods. So I always give, again, Nicole and I are not going to make specific recommendations about how many grams of protein every person needs, because it does vary person to person. But I always say, as a good rule of thumb, especially for our growing athletes, like I always like to see them aim for about 15 to 20 grams of protein. It can be more, but at a minimum, shooting for that at a meal. So what does 3.5 ounces look like? So if you look at your palm, obviously our palms are all different sizes, but a palm is approximately thickness as well as size is about 3 ounces. So typically if you're having something that's about the size of your palm, you're going to be getting at least about 20 to 25. And you can look through this list here and take note of how many grams of proteins are in different foods. Things like, I don't think I have yogurt. Do I have yogurt on here? I don't. So yogurts are typically, if it's a Greek yogurt or like an Icelandic, like a Siggy's, they're going to have closer to like 12 to 15 grams. Whereas a regular yogurt, which is still fine if you prefer that, has about 8 grams of protein, which is comparable to like an 8-ounce glass of milk. So, and note also that almond milk, it only has about 1 gram of protein. So some of them are now there's a few brands that have like almond plus cashew, which are higher. If you are allergic to dairy, Lactaid is a great product, or soy milk directly matches the protein content of cow's milk.
All right. Our last macronutrient here, as we're building our athlete's plate together. So dietary fats is one that we really like to make sure athletes are getting. And I'm sure we get many an athlete in our clinic that is a big fan of peanut butter, which is great, because that's one of the sources that we think of. But we do a lot of education around why fats are important. They're definitely macronutrients that, similar to carbs, have a history of some misunderstanding around their role in the diet. So fats are an incredible source of energy for the body. So when we are thinking about energy sources, we do think of predominantly carbs, but in certain cases, fat can be used for fuel as well.
Yep.
And we really like to think of a balance. So again, Laura and I are, really thinking about balancing out things. We're not gonna, we don't want any sort of restrictive approach. So when we're thinking about fats, there's saturated fats, which are the ones that we tend to think of as solid at room temperature. Things like butter, or maybe some of the fats that'll be in some animal protein. And then we have the unsaturated fats. So these will be things like your olive oils. And we really want to get a balance of those. So the recommendation is to get more unsaturated, but that doesn't mean we're ditching the butter. I know I certainly don't.
Me neither.
So we really want to help make sure and emphasize getting in fats throughout the day and at every meal. They are important for our immune health, help us from getting sick, important for our hormones, and they help with nutrient absorption. So we have 4 fat-soluble vitamins that we take in through our diet with important roles in the body. These are vitamins A, D, E, and K. And if we add a fat source to our meal, we're actually going to absorb more of those nutrients from that meal. So if you're having a nice colorful salad as part of your meal, like adding on avocado, cheese, salad dressing, you're going to get more nutrition out of that. So it's actually going to optimize that absorption and that the way you can use those nutrients.
Yep.
Similar to protein, they help us feel full and satisfied, which is also important because, you know, in our most time, not currently when we're mostly at home, but in our day-to-day, we're very much on the go. So we're looking for how can we get a meal that's going to give us the nutrients we need and also help carry us through until our next eating occasion. Yes, these examples, I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, but like things like oils, like olive oil, avocados, which is one of my favorite foods, nuts and nut butters, and flax seeds are great sources.
So this is sort of, this is kind of sums up a lot of the things that we're talking about. Like, how do we put it all together, right? So this is a really great tool. It was developed by the US Olympic Committee sports dietitians, and it's great. It's visual. So I know I have so many athletes at all different levels that will literally, I give them a printout, they hang it up in their rooms, in their dorm rooms, in their lockers, to really help them understand what should my plate look like, what should the balance of the nutrients on my plate look like in different times of training. Now, I do want to add a caveat to this for our growing athletes. Remember that everybody's energy needs are a little bit different. You're going to have some people that have incredibly high calorie needs, and some of that can be genetic. Some people's metabolisms are just really, really fast. And especially during those like growth years, sometimes we need to really these plates might not be enough, right? Or you might need to have 2 plates. So I just want to add that caveat. But when we think about these 3 plates, if you look at them, I really would say, even Nicole, and I would guess you agree with this too, the easy training, like our weight management plate, is one I don't really often use at all with like my adolescents and growing athletes, because it's pretty low in carbs.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So I typically think, focus more on sort of the plate in the middle, the moderate training plate, as well as the hard training plate, which is the plate in red. So if you notice, if you look at those plates from left to right, basically the carbohydrates are the thing that increases the most with an increased volume of training. So moderate training, we usually say, is somewhere from like an hour, hour and a half, or, you know, that hard training plate for some of you might be your daily plate, right? Which is more.
For many of our athletes, they are using hard training in their day-to-day. They need more of those carbohydrates. Something we also use the athlete's plate to illustrate is, you know, we do get athletes in our clinic who are injured, who maybe had to adapt their training styles. They're in their off season. They're not training at the same level maybe they would be in their season. And we like to make sure to illustrate that even with lower training, even in the absence of training, none of the food groups ever go away. So we really like to emphasize that and to, you know, explain the importance of that, since sometimes we do run into that in our clinic. So we want to make sure we're getting all the food groups all the time, and then just thinking about how to shift that balance to better support fueling. Yeah, so Laura, if you want, I can kind of take it away for a few slides.
I need a breather. I'll let you go, Nicole.
Yeah, since you like went through the whole presentation.
Yep, I did, actually.
So this slide, this message is something that Laura and I bring into our clinic every single day with every athlete. And we've alluded to this earlier in the presentation, and that's really that truly all foods fit. So we are both all foods fit non-diet dietitians. We do not believe in good or bad foods. We don't think that food has morality, so we don't know why we need to give it those categorizations. We really do believe in the importance of balance of nutrients, of food, and of timing, and really understanding with education how to use certain foods at certain times to get the results you're looking for. And food is fuel, and it's so much more than that too. So, making sure to like have your food as fuel, but also, enjoy your food. Food is social. Food is connection. Food is celebration. So we want to make sure to really emphasize all of that. And we do not cut food groups out. We don't cut foods out of anyone's diet unless someone has an allergy or an intolerance and it's medically necessary too.
Right.
Otherwise, they should and could include it in their day to day.
Yep.
Yes. So nutrient timing. So this is, really thinking about practices, competitions, how we use nutrition to get the most out of giving ourselves energy for performance, and then supporting the recovery process. So this first slide is all about that kind of pre-timing, what to eat before and how close. So as you can see, we have our little graphic of our man on the starting line. I'm not sure where this graphic is from, but he's quite styling. But as you can see, as you look further out from that slide, you're really seeing a larger piece of the pie, so to speak, and a greater distribution of the different macronutrients. So you have carbohydrates, and you have protein, and you have fat. So in that 3 to 4 hour mark, you're looking at more of a meal. As you get closer to an activity, you can see that it really hones in on the carbohydrates, and that slice is getting smaller as you get to that point of starting exercise or maybe starting a race. And that's because, as Laura was saying, when we're thinking about fast carbohydrates in particular and carbohydrates in general, they are our energy, and they're our quickest form of energy. So if we're looking at, an hour before or closer to exercise, you can see it's predominantly carbohydrate. We really don't want to get too much protein, fat, or fiber, as that can slow digestion and feel uncomfortable in the stomach.
Yep.
Yeah. So, really focusing in on, we have a few examples down the line, but getting something in, carbohydrates, small amount, Gatorade if you're not comfortable with food, a banana, a granola bar. I remember when I was in high school, before a race, I'd be given like a goo packet maybe 15 minutes before the starting block. And, that just gave that little boost of carbohydrate into my system. So it's really kind of thinking about that. And a lot of this is about experimentation. So some athletes can have maybe a little bit more protein, a little bit more fat content and feel fine. Some really need, straight carbohydrate. So for athletes, really encouraging experimentation, practicing in practice, so that when they get to competition, they feel like they have their go-to formula.
Yep.
And then recovery. So recovery is also a big and important piece of fueling. And Laura has always described it to me, and I love it, is the fueling sandwich. So you have your, pre and your post, during. When you have that formula, when you have that recipe for fueling and recovery, you're really doing yourself a great service when it comes to your performance.
Yep.
So we have what's called the recovery window, and that's within 30 to 45 minutes or so following finishing activity, whether it's a race, practice, any sort of athletic bout, where the body is really in recovery mode, and the enzymes in the body are working really hard to replenish stores, to repair muscle. So if we take in carbohydrates and protein in that window, we're actually speeding up the recovery process. We're making it as optimal as possible. So you may have heard of chocolate milk as a gold standard example of recovery, and that really is because it has a blend of carbohydrates and protein in it, and with it being chocolate, which is one, delicious, but two, it gives it that extra boost of carbohydrate that your body can benefit from. And then you want that next meal that someone has following that recovery snack to be that nice balanced meal, athlete's plate, getting protein, carbs, and fat, like the example provided.
And one thing to remember too is if you are someone that you are home from practice within 15 minutes and it is dinner time and it is there when you get home, or that can act as your recovery meal as well. So it's really just about making sure that you're getting in carbohydrates and protein in that recovery window. But most people, by the time you get out of practice and you get home and maybe you take a shower, it's usually a little bit longer. So something like a chocolate milk. We actually have a great slide. This one sort of exemplifies and breaks down what Nicole was just talking about, the pre-workout being mainly carbohydrates, and some examples and some ideas in there for you to play around with. And again, everybody's individual. So you want to experiment with what combination or what food maybe makes you feel your best. I'm also a big fan of like the Cheerios and the raisins in a little Ziploc bag. It can live in your bag. It can hang out in there for a few days if you don't get to it. But a lot of nice, easy options there. And then in that post-workout recovery window, again, our friend, the chocolate milk, tried and true. A lot of those like yogurt smoothies that are out there now, like the portable, the Chobani ones and things like that. Graham crackers and peanut butter, or peanut butter pretzels, one of my personal favorites. Half a sandwich, or even, again, a complete meal if you're going to. And people always ask me what PBAB is. So that's peanut butter or almond butter. So a little quick, shorthand there.
Abbreviation.
I'll intro this, Nicole, and then if you want to,
sounds good.
I'll jump back in. I've gotten to rest my voice a little bit. So Nicole and I often use the analogy of your body is like a car, right? So think about what happens when your car is on empty. Not really good, right? No one likes to see that. And the car doesn't go, it stops, right? So now think about that in terms of training. If you're not getting enough energy filling your tank up, your body's going to run out of energy. And then that's not going to mean good things for performance, but also your overall health, right? So we're going to introduce this idea of energy availability with another analogy.
We love analogies here.
We do. We love them. We love them.
Yeah. They make it fun. So I imagine, many, if not all of you have a smartphone and probably have at least once run into the low battery situation. You can't get your charger, and you're forced to go into low battery mode in order to, conserve that power and allow you to use your phone. So if you think about what happens to a smartphone in low power mode, it has maybe the brightness of the screen decreases, apps aren't refreshing as frequently. I've definitely gotten low enough, like 5% remaining, where it's like certain apps just don't work anymore. It's like, okay, you can text and you can use your phone, and that's pretty much it.
Yep.
So we use this analogy to think, reflect that back and think about, the body is very similar. The body has the fuel that it's given from the diet, from intake, and it's going to use that for the things that it needs to do for things like activity and movement, but also for other functions. So, breathing, heart rate, menstrual function for female athletes, bone building, all of that takes energy too. And if we are not getting in enough fuel going in, our body can enter its own version of low power mode. Which is that energy available state that we call low energy availability.
Yep. So this is just another way of looking at it, that the calories that you're consuming in a day minus your calories that you're expending through training leave what's left over, the idea of energy availability. So we want this to be a positive number. We don't want it to be a low number. So there was actually a study that was done by our group at Children's that surveyed 1,000 female athletes that were coming to the sports medicine clinic for any reason, right? So it might have just been a sprained ankle or shoulder pain or something like that. And this is a crazy number. 47.3% were identified as having low energy availability. So just think about that. That's basically like if you have 10 people in the waiting room, like half of them, right? So these numbers have been staggering, and our group has really been looking at a lot of doing a lot more screening with this, and we're seeing that there's so many athletes that are falling into this category. So this is, and again, I think to reflect back on, Mary Cain's story in the news, really bringing up this idea of low energy availability and the the negative impacts that it can have on your body. So this is kind of a really imperative topic right now. So I want to make sure we get through this one today.
Yeah. So when we're thinking of, and many of you be wondering what to be on the lookout for, because there are certain signs and symptoms, and though everyone has maybe a different presentation, these are ones that we see more often than not in our clinics, and ones that we like to put out there for education and for, you know, our athletes and coaches to be thinking about, as far as maybe when does someone need a referral to, you know, like Laura was saying in the beginning, we have a wonderful sports endocrinologist that we work with at the female athlete program. We, you know, we ourselves work with the low energy available kind of athletes. So some of these signs and symptoms include excessive fatigue, anemia or other nutrition deficiencies, which can result from not getting enough in, muscle loss, recurrent injury, illness, or infection, menstrual dysfunction for female athletes. But this isn't exclusive to female athletes. We see this in our males as well, which is why hormone irregularities are also there. Like we'll see male athletes with very low testosterone. And so these are definitely, you know, signs and symptoms we see across both genders. Stress, difficulty recovering is one that we hear. Laura, you may hear out too, like someone who just really tired legs, inability to kind of like feel that powerful spring in the step that they want to, or inability to make strength or performance gains despite all the work that they put in. We also see, you know, irritability, difficulty sleeping, or difficulty staying asleep, and poor concentration. So like I said, these aren't necessarily, you know, going to be the same for everyone, but if you have if yourself or you notice an athlete is, you know, experiencing these or sharing these, it could be worth taking a look at the nutrition, taking a look at the energy availability, and seeing could there be some small tweaks that could be made to better support that athlete.
Right. Yep. No, it's well put, Nicole. This is just another way of looking at this. This idea of low energy availability is also the more scientific name, or the one being used really in a low energy availability is also very scientific. But relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS, is, you know, another way that we're looking at this idea of low energy availability. So some of you out there might be familiar with the female athlete triad, which really just focused on females and just focused on bone health, menstrual function, and calorie intake. But now we know, if you look around the circle, in the interest of time, I won't go through all of them, but Nicole just gave a really nice summary, that basically being in an energy deficit can affect pretty much every system in the body. I will highlight for a second growth and development, because again, in an adolescent athlete, Nicole and I spend a lot of time reviewing growth charts in our sessions as well for our growing athletes. We will see a plateau in someone's height sometimes when they're in an energy deficit. We get them more well fed, and all of a sudden we see an increase in growth again. Same thing with weight. If we're noticing that an athlete is all of a sudden dipping off of that graph, that growth chart rather, excuse me, that is a sign to us that there's an energy deficit going on there. We need to feed more, right? Because we want you following those nice growth curves, which means increasing in height and weight throughout your adolescent years, right? We don't want to see you losing weight or plateauing in your height. We want you all to get as tall as you're meant to be, right? And this is another diagram. It looks incredibly similar, but this is the one, Nicole, I know you'd agree with this, that really speaks to our athletes the most, because these are your performance consequences. So Nicole really already highlighted a lot of these on that other slide that we created, but this is a whole slide that shows all these different places that your performance, not just the health. I always find that like the parents like the health one better, and the athletes are like, yeah. But what's it going to do to my performance? Well, there's one for each of you. So this is just another way of looking at the potential performance consequences of being in an energy deficit.
Absolutely. And so when we're, you know, seeing an athlete with low energy availability or relative energy deficiency in sport, and they come in and they're presenting, you know, with these concerns, with these issues that, you know, Laura had detailed on the REDS model, we're really trying to focus in on honing in what the possible cause is. And so there are, you know, the more intentional energy, low energy available states that usually occur from an eating disorder or disordered eating. But then there's also the unintentional causes of low energy availability. where you're just not getting enough intake or expenditure. And these include, just a lack of education around high energy needs, incredibly high energy demands. Laura, I'm sure you see this too. I see so many athletes who are doing, 3 sports. If they're doing something like hockey or soccer, it's for like the club, the town, and the school. So beyond, lack of education or just really high energy needs, also, sometimes food allergies make it difficult, or if there's any sort of medical reason. So if there's low energy availability, Laura and I are making sure to do a full workup and evaluation and referral when needed to make sure that we're really figuring out the cause. Because if we can determine the root cause, we're going to have an appropriate plan of action to remedy it.
Yep. Another thing I want to add to that was great. Nicole hit it all on the head, but we have a lot of athletes that are on that medications for ADHD, or like Adderall being one of the common ones. I know there's some others, which takes the appetite away, right? So I know we have a lot of adolescents that we work with trying to just kind of help you be able to fuel your body, even though you might not be hungry all day, especially at school, right? Like lunchtime, I know is really hard when you take those medications that take your appetite away, but your food intake is still really important. Or time, I know, can be a big issue for athletes. Like lunchtime is like 15 minutes, which is crazy. We need to start a march for more time at lunch, in my opinion. But it's there's a lot of external factors that can cause this as well. So it's not just that someone is struggling with like an eating disorder, but there could be a lot of external things that cause an energy deficit as well. So just to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. And I think in the interest of time, I think we're going to have to unfortunately cut off there. But that was really, those are the bigger, just talked a little bit more about calcium and vitamin D and iron. But I think we're unfortunately going to have to stop there. In the interest of
Laura and Nicole, thank you. And for our listeners, thank you for jumping through some hoops to get back in. Obviously, we're hoping to do Q&A here, but we're otherwise out of time. I'll figure out how we maybe can piece this together on the recording to make something whole out of it, and pick back up. We do plan to do additional, sessions on nutrition, sleep, other off the field items, and hopefully we can do some of these live and in person before too long. So, whatever you're looking for, audience, let us know. Nicole, Laura, thank you. And I'll shut this down now, and we'll make do with the edit in a few days.
Yep.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you,
care.
guys.
Thank you.
Be safe, everyone.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.